From when you were growing up to now, how have you seen the shift in conversation around mental health?
If we're talking about men's mental health, unfortunately, it's changing pretty rapidly because it's hard to sort of grasp where we're at the moment when it comes to men's mental health. What I mean by that is if you're not in the space, it might be hard to understand. So when you're in the space, you can see what's happening in the background that you don't really see. But at the same time, there's more conversations, but that conversations are getting harder to be heard. I think it's painting a picture that these young boys have to almost prove themselves. And that's something, I look back 15 years ago, I was taught to not do this, not do that, be respectful, say please and thank yous. But I think young boys and men now, they're being taught that they have to grow up and prove that they are a good man. They have to prove that they're not, I suppose, a monster, which is really, really sad. And it's a really, really tough space for young boys and men at the moment to grow up, to be, I suppose, accepted in some states of life and being able to accept of just who they are.
Yeah, I think when you talk about, boys growing up and the struggle there, I think overall in society, there is a complete identity crisis. People don't know a lot of the time who they are, who they should be, who they're expected to be. They completely lose. Okay, I'm a boy. I've got to show my masculinity, but then they're talking that I've got to be a little bit more feminine, and they're going into relationships kind of going, well, do I need to be the alpha male or do I need to show my softer side? But if I show my softer side, then I'm not strong enough for my partner. Like there's all these things that are going on. And like I say, the earth, when it comes to people's identity, to men, to women, to relationships, I think the Earth's kind of a little bit off its axis at the moment. And from a deeper perspective, we can see all the issues around the world. It's a pretty crazy world out there. And when people are dealing with mental health, when people are dealing with struggling with their identity, they're dealing with their past, their traumas, their childhood, all the things that are kind of happen throughout their life. It's a pretty crazy world. And it really is, I suppose, all we can do, what you're doing, what I'm doing, what a lot of the guys doing, this work in mental health space in, kind of forming brotherhoods and forming kind of movements, is that we're kind of trying to lead our children and the generations coming through to be a little bit more vulnerable, but to really know that they can make mistakes and those mistakes don't need to define themselves, right? Those mistakes are actually points of growth for them. Just like if you go through a mental health challenge, as Sean, you come out of it stronger, and, as a mental health first aid instructor, I always say that, it's not about, and I did a course yesterday and I was saying to a gentleman and I said, it's not about me standing up here as an instructor and being an expert. I'm here to facilitate. I'm here to kind of share my knowledge and share the program and really kind of collaborate and engage. And I learn stuff from participants every course. But I said, it's really about, just sharing that journey and really just kind of trying to move the needle in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really scary moment I had last year. I was at a school up in New South Wales, and I was talking to some, they would have been maybe year 10 students, both boys and girls, and we were talking about mental health, and we had a young man ask a question about the gender roles of mental health and suicide. And I said, look, we're here to talk about everyone's mental health, absolutely, but 75% of suicides, unfortunately, worldwide are young boys and young men. And as I said it, and as I said that they're men, there was a young girl or two young girls in front of me that laughed and said, "Oh well, now that isn't their fault. They're very young girls." But when I saw that scared the shit out of me, because again, I'm not blaming them. But that sort of attitude towards, it's not even towards boys and men, it's just towards other people, is obviously something they've been taught. again, not their fault. It's something that they've, whether it be through social media, whether it be through, influence of our older people, whatever it might be. But that was almost a year ago now, and I think about that almost daily. That really affected me. Of what are we doing wrong for our next generation? And as you would have seen, at the gala, I'm very much about the next generation. I'm very much about, hey, we sort of grew up in a time where we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about suicide prevention. Now we are talking about it, but we've got to try and make sure we're doing it right for the next generation. And I think a lot of factors go into that, including just that, I suppose, that mutual respect for everyone, depending on their race, religion, their sexuality, their gender, all those sorts of things, having that respect for everyone and having that I suppose, that personal acknowledgement of other people. And I think that becomes vulnerability too. And I think that's something that I suppose I had to learn pretty quick as well when I started this work, is that this mental health thing is it doesn't discriminate whatsoever. It goes through all pillars of life, all of our different adversities throughout the world. And if we're talking about just Australia, it goes even deeper too. So I think that's a really, really tough thing about what's going on at the moment, especially with social media. But it's something that, again, us adults, is something that we really have to try and make sure that we're looking after that next generation, and molding something, I suppose, that they can go into a world where they don't have to, if they do make mistakes, that they can, I suppose, get through those mistakes and become better people. And we're not labeling people, we're not labeling kids, we're not labeling young boys or young girls as whatever we think they might be. I think that's a really dangerous thing. And we're just giving them those tools to be able to make mistakes and to be able to get through different things and be able to, I suppose, recognize those things. And it's almost like being a facilitator, isn't it? It's just giving them those tools to say, hey, this is going to be hard. You may screw up. You might get it wrong. In fact, you probably will get it wrong. But it doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you a person. And being able to give them those tools to be able to get through that, and not shutting them down, I think it's really, really important.
I think also as well, when topics come up or things, and I'll give you an example. I've got an almost 16-year-old and a son that just turned 18, and going through the journey that I have, I've spoken to them very openly and honestly through that process, and probably it's gained even more strength and probably more pace, talking even more openly and honestly to them as the journey kind of progressed. But when things, I remember sitting in the car one day with my almost 16-year-old, and this was probably maybe 3 years ago, and he said, "Oh, Dad, I just saw, 12-year-old girl just took her life because of bullying online," right? Now, I think past generations, like my parents and their parents, like those kind of conversations, they just kind of move on to the next subject, right? For me, I see it as an opportunity to actually have a really good conversation, a really open and honest conversation, and a really good opportunity to remind, our kids that, hey, let's talk about this. Let's, like social media is tough, and you can get caught in that cycle on certain things. But at the end of the day, as I always say, just remember, you can always pick up the phone and ring your mum, ring your dad. I'm always here for you. There is never a problem that, you're not going to be able to solve or fix or whatever it is, right? Like if you're struggling, if you've done something wrong, if you've made a mistake, I don't care. I'd rather you ring me and say, "Hey, Dad, I've stuffed up. How can we fix it?" Rather than kind of holding that weight, keeping that kind of feeling of, we know that feeling, when we've done something wrong in life, that feeling you get in your gut, that just real anxious, you just want to vomit basically, right? And I want to move past our kids. Yes, they can have those feelings, but not hold on to those feelings and let it define them, and let them. And I suppose when it comes to mental health, it's very much about, okay, you feel that way, cool, how do you recover? And over time, kind of learning to recover quicker, so if you're not feeling great and you do some things that you enjoy, or you have a cold shower or cold plunge, or you do some breath work, or whatever you're going to do, if that helps you, next time that when you're feeling not great, you can put those things in place. You can use those tools out of your toolbox that are actually going to change your state, are going to change your state of mind, and you're going to bounce back quicker. It's not about, being completely resilient and not kind of feeling sad and not having things affect you. It's about making sure that you can recover and bounce back quicker each and every time.
Yeah, absolutely. That giving those tools is really important. I think especially when a situation comes up, it's really important for us to peel back that situation as well and give them those tools, and being able to look at, I remember that happening up in Brisbane, and it was just, it's just heartbreaking. It just shouldn't be happening. And, I think it's really important to peel back the conversation and peel back the situation of what happens. And, we often see sometimes when things like this happen, or other things, it's a lot of, blaming and pointing the finger and all these different things too. But it's so important to look at something and think, right, why did this happen? And essentially own our mistakes. What did we do wrong for this to happen? What do we do wrong as a community, or as a I suppose an environment of a school, or as a company, or whatever it might be, and look at what we can do to make this better and make this not happen again. And I think you see this all the time. You see it all the time around Australia, of that, I suppose, trying to peel back a conversation a little bit further, and trying to, except for punishing something or punishing someone, is actually peeling back and saying, right, what can we do? Because this is an issue and this is harming people. There was recently a story down from Victoria that a young kid, he stole some money from a charity, a fundraising thing, and he gambled it away. And horrible, absolutely horrible thing to do. Just dreadful. And it got huge amount of news. All this conversation around how much of a awful person he is and terrible, and I don't disagree. What he did was just horrible. But we have a conversation like that, and then we turn on the footy and there's 30 gambling ads before we can even watch the footy, and we're not talking about that. And that's just that, those conversations are the ones that really sort of make it tougher. And I said before how that conversation is changing every week, and the media have a lot to answer for. We look at the 7 o'clock news of more domestic violence and these horrible things that are happening. And then we have shows like, Married at First Sight, that are allowing people to punch walls, and they think it's great. They think it's great TV. It doesn't make sense. And they're sending the wrong message to the kids. They will look at the news at 7 o'clock and say, hey, don't be violent. It's the wrong thing to do. And then they watch MAFS and they're like, hey, how good is this? So it's just a lot of people have a lot of things to answer for, I think, and the media's one of them. Especially this country has this really tough relationship with mental health and with suicide. And I think we need to, peel back a lot of conversations if we're going to fix it.